Have you ever wondered about the true cost of war? The Afghanistan War in particular has been a topic of global concern. It's a saga that spanned decades, shaping and reshaping the very fabric of the world as we know it. Unfolding in the rugged landscapes of Afghanistan, this war has echoed through the halls of power, from Washington to Moscow, leaving a trail of consequences in its wake. As we turn the pages of history, we find ourselves face to face with a narrative that's as complex as it is compelling. Today we delve into the history and current situation of the Afghanistan War. Prepare for a journey back in time. The Afghanistan War didn't start overnight. It has a long history dating back to the late 1970s. The country, once a peaceful monarchy, was thrown into chaos when the Communist People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan seized power in a coup in 1978. This marked the beginning of a series of events that would lead to a full-blown war. In December 1979, in an attempt to support the struggling communist regime, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, sparking a war that lasted for over 9 years. The Afghan resistance fighters, known as the Mujahideen, waged a fierce guerrilla warfare against the Soviet forces, aided by international support from countries like the United States, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. However, the war took a heavy toll on the country, leading to widespread destruction, loss of lives, and displacement of people. When the Soviets eventually withdrew in 1989, they left behind a country in ruins and a power vacuum waiting to be filled. This vacuum led to a brutal civil war in the early 1990s, as different Mujahideen factions vied for control. Amidst this chaos, a new group emerged, promising stability and rule of law. They were the Taliban. The Taliban, primarily comprised of Pashtun students from religious schools in Pakistan, quickly gained control over much of the country. By 1996, they had captured the capital Kabul and declared an Islamic emirate. Their rule, however, was marked by severe restrictions, particularly on women and human rights abuses. By the turn of the millennium, Afghanistan was in the grip of the Taliban, setting the stage for the next phase of the war. The events of September 11, 2001, dramatically changed the dynamics of the Afghanistan War. A devastating terrorist attack on American soil, orchestrated by Al-Qaeda, a group harbored by the Taliban in Afghanistan, led to the United States declaring a war on terror. This marked the beginning of a new era in the Afghanistan conflict, with the U.S. stepping in with full force. In the wake of the terror attacks, the U.S., backed by its NATO allies, initiated a military intervention in Afghanistan. The primary objective was to dismantle Al-Qaeda and to remove the Taliban from power, who had refused to surrender Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the September 11th attacks. By December 2001, the Taliban regime was overthrown, and a new interim government was established under the leadership of Hamid Karzai. But this was just the first step in a long journey. The U.S. and its allies then moved to establish a more stable democratic government in Afghanistan. In 2004, Afghanistan held its first democratic elections, resulting in the election of Karzai as the president. This marked a significant milestone in the country's history, symbolizing a shift from years of oppressive Taliban rule to a more democratic form of governance. However, even as progress was made on the political front, the situation on the ground was far from stable. The Taliban, while ousted from power, were not entirely defeated. They retreated to the rural areas of Afghanistan and neighboring Pakistan, regrouping and launching a guerrilla war against the new Afghan government and its international allies. Furthermore, the U.S.'s focus on nation-building in Afghanistan was soon diverted, as it turned its attention to another conflict, the Iraq War, which started in 2003. This shift in focus led to a decrease in resources and attention dedicated to Afghanistan, creating an opportunity for the Taliban to regain their strength. But the war was far from over, and the next years would prove to be a challenging period for Afghanistan and the world. Despite the initial success of the US-led coalition, the Taliban managed to make a comeback. The group, originally ousted from power in 2001, began to regain strength around 2005. This resurgence was not a mere stroke of luck, but a carefully planned strategy, exploiting the vulnerabilities of the Afghan government and the foreign troops stationed in the country. The Taliban employed guerrilla warfare tactics, blending in with the local population and launching surprise attacks on coalition forces. They capitalized on the rugged and often treacherous terrain of Afghanistan, using it to their advantage to carry out ambushes and hit-and-run attacks. These tactics not only demoralized foreign troops but also made it difficult for them to effectively combat the Taliban. Additionally, the Taliban capitalized on the grievances of the Afghan population. Perceived corruption within the Afghan government, coupled with the devastation caused by years of war, provided fertile ground for the Taliban to sow seeds of dissent. They promised justice, stability, and a better life under their rule, a promise that resonated with many Afghans who were exhausted by years of conflict and instability. The Afghan government and its foreign allies faced a multitude of challenges in combating this resurgence. The sheer geographical spread of Taliban activity, the lack of a centralized command structure, and the complex tribal dynamics of Afghanistan further complicated the task of suppressing the group. Moreover, the Afghan security forces, despite being trained and equipped by foreign powers, struggled to maintain control without the direct support of foreign troops. As the years passed, the war took a heavy toll on both the Afghan people and the foreign troops. The human cost of the war grew, with thousands of lives lost and millions displaced. The financial burden, too, was immense, with billions of dollars poured into a war that seemed to have no end in sight. As the war dragged on, the call for peace became louder. The international community, the Afghan people, and even some factions within the Taliban began to recognize that a military solution was unlikely. This paved the way for peace talks and negotiations, a process fraught with its own set of challenges and complexities, but that's a story for our next scene. The last few years have seen efforts to end the Afghanistan war and bring peace to the country. These efforts have been marked by a series of negotiations and agreements, with the United States at the helm, attempting to broker a deal between the Afghan government and the resurgent Taliban. In 2020, the U.S. and the Taliban inked a peace agreement promising an end to hostilities, the withdrawal of foreign troops, and a commitment to prevent any group or individual from using Afghan soil to threaten the security of the U.S. and its allies. This deal, however, was met with skepticism and concern, with many questioning the Taliban's commitment to peace and their ties to terrorist groups. Fast forward to 2021, when President Joe Biden announced the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, marking the end of America's longest war. This decision, however, was not without controversy. Concerns were raised about the ongoing threat of terrorism, the Taliban's oppressive rule, and the potential for a power vacuum leading to increased violence and instability. And these concerns were not unfounded. As the U.S. pulled out, the Taliban swiftly regained control of the country, leaving many to question the purpose of the sacrifices made over the past 2 decades. The withdrawal sparked not only frustration and disappointment among U.S. veterans, but also fear for their Afghan allies who had worked closely with them and were now left at risk. Today, the situation in Afghanistan remains precarious. The Taliban's rule has brought with it a host of challenges, including economic hardship, human rights abuses, and a lack of access to basic services. The international community continues to watch closely, grappling with how to engage with the Taliban-led government while ensuring the protection of human rights and preventing the country from once again becoming a haven for terrorist groups. The future of Afghanistan hangs in the balance, with the world watching closely. Looking back at the Afghanistan War, it's clear that it has had far-reaching impacts. The genesis of the war, rooted in political and ideological conflicts, set the stage for a struggle that would last for over 2 decades. The United States, in its quest to eradicate terrorism, intervened, marking the beginning of America's longest war. The intervention, though initially successful, faced challenges as the Taliban resurged, regaining control over vast territories. The path to peace has been a rocky one, with diplomatic efforts often falling short of achieving a lasting resolution. Today, the situation in Afghanistan remains complex and uncertain. The withdrawal of U.S. troops in 2021 has sparked a range of emotions and raised pressing concerns about the safety of Afghan allies and the potential for increased violence and instability. The war in Afghanistan has not only shaped the course of the nation, but also sent ripples across the globe. It has influenced foreign policies, strained international relations, and highlighted the complexities of interventionist strategies. It has brought to the forefront the urgent need for sustainable peace-building measures that prioritize the safety and well-being of the people. However, it's crucial to remember that the effects of this war extend beyond geopolitical boundaries. They touch the lives of countless individuals, veterans grappling with the aftermath of the war, families torn apart, and civilians bearing the brunt of the conflict. As we end our discussion, we leave you with this thought: the true cost of war extends beyond the battlefield. It's a cost that nations and people bear for generations.